Guest is Mr. Dave Tatum. Dave is he's a graduate of, he was brought up in Darby in the 1950s and 60s. He was inspired by President Kennedy's when he said, don't ask what the country can do for you, but ask what you can do for the country. He graduated from Bonner at 17 years old. He enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. He had 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. He got injured at the DMZ and got a Purple Heart for that. He went to college at Westchester University using his GI Bill and became a teacher at Upper Darby High School. He taught there for close to 40 years. He taught history, and he actually had his class do papers on the 185 veterans from Delaware County that died in Vietnam. He did their bios, and their bios became part of the Historical Society of Delaware County, and they were recognized by Delaware County. Dave also was recognized for many teaching achievements as a teacher at Upper Darby. It's a great pleasure that I present Dave Tatum.
It's indeed an honor to be here today. I have a great story for you. I'm glad to see so many young people here because that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about young people today. And as a teacher, I always had to work Veterans Day. I don't really think that that's fair, but I would tell my friends, my veteran friends, and say, hey, call in sick, take a personal day, something like that. There's a great parade in media. Let's go march. And I would say, no. Veterans Day is a great day to teach because I always wanted to teach my students the difference between Memorial Day, when we remember those who lost their lives in the war and those veterans who are now gone, and Veterans Day. This is a day for young people to go out and find someone who served in the military. Maybe it's your grandfather, your uncle, your mom, or your aunt, and say thank you for your service. So for me, when I would come into my classroom towards the end of my career, last dozen years, I would open that door, and there would be a hot cup of coffee and thank you cards all over my desk, and Danish. It was a great day to teach. But today, one of the things I want to talk to you about is a project that I was involved in with my students. And I went to Monsignor Bonner and graduated in 1965. And I'll never forget the 16 fellow classmates that died in Vietnam. And a block away, it's Upper Darby High School where I taught, and 16 died there. And Chester High School, we're really close to that, more than 30. But there was one school in Philadelphia who lost 64 of their classmates, their graduates. Do you know who what school that is? Edison, yes, Edison. So today I want to tell you about an incredible group of students at Upper Darby High School that was my privilege to teach. And you can find their story in this book. It's called Died on the 4th of July. So in the course of doing some research with my students, John Schlatter, who wrote this book, he was curious about, do we remember those that gave their lives, and if so, are they honored? And in doing so, he ran across some remembrances that I left on the internet for some of the folks from Upper Darby or Delaware County that died. Because what he wanted to do is, he couldn't look at everybody, so one of the things that he decided to do is look at one day, the 4th of July, and the soldiers that died, servicemen that died that day, 167. And he ran across the name of Bobby Resnick from Upper Darby, and also Ken Burley. And he contacted me, and he wanted to know about what we were doing at Upper Darby, and there's a whole chapter about that right here. And just incredible work with my students writing biographies of the 185 young men who lost their lives. Now, 8 women were killed in Vietnam, nurses, and luckily none from Delaware County. But course of teaching, I had to teach about the Vietnam War. And it always happened. At the end of the unit or something, one of my students would ask, Mr. Tatum, you were there. What was it really like? And no matter what I said to them, I knew it fell short. Because how could you do that? How could you communicate to these young people what it is like to be in a war and see friends and killed and wounded, the loss that our community suffered during that war and every war? And I just knew I couldn't really find the words until one day at Marcus Hook. Down at Marcus Hook, there's a memorial to those 185 young men. And in the 1990s, one of the veterans groups made possible for a replica, one-third replica of the Vietnam Memorial to be erected there. So I figured, hey, we just learned about the Vietnam War. Let's go on a field trip. Hey, let's go. So we went down to the beautiful park in the Delaware and Marcus Hook. And I had prepared a worksheet for my students with the names of the students from Upper Darby and taught them how to find those names. And after a few words from the local chapter of the Vietnam Veterans of America, they went scurrying to take rubbings of those walls. All except one young man. And his name is David. And he walked over to the memorial and he touched one of the names. And I got his picture. I said, David, what are you doing? And he said, he was my uncle. And in that instance, my life changed. I knew exactly what I had to do with my students. So when we went back for May and for June, we started collecting pictures from the yearbooks and on the bulletin board of the young men from Upper Darby. And when September rolled around, I was ready. So as my new students walked into my classroom, usual thing, tell them about the curriculum, tell them what they're going to learn. And then I tell them, oh yes, and it's required that you write a research paper with bibliography and footnotes and all that stuff. And the groan, it's always the same thing, the groan. And I said to them, no, this is going to be like nothing else that you have ever done. And I said, follow me. So I walked outside my classroom, and we walked down the hall, and then we went down to the auditorium. If you've ever been to Upper Darby High School auditorium, there's all these plaques of everyone that has died in the war. And in World War I, or served, and World War II, Korea, and I'm sure now they have Afghanistan and Iraq. So I started pointing to one of the names and talking about Bobby Resnick. And then I stopped and I said, well, wait a second. This is just a name on the wall. Let's go meet them. And I opened the door, walked out of the door of the high school, and I said, follow me. We waited at the light. And does anybody know what's across the street from Upper Darby High School? I see, it's a cemetery, Arlington Cemetery. So I walked, it was a beautiful day. I walked my students into the cemetery, and as I went in there, I stopped at the grave of Robert Matthews. And I began to talk about his life and how he died in Vietnam. And then I moved a few feet over to Donald Mansell's grave. And I began to talk about how he was only married 7 months before he was killed in Vietnam. And even though his widow remarried and had a family, and when she died, she wanted to be buried with Donald. And then I walked over to the grave of Ed Riley. And as I'm talking about Ed Riley, my students are looking down on the ground, and they noticed that there was something behind the grave. There was a helmet. It was my helmet. And in that, there were 185 names. And I said, your research paper this year is going to be a name from this helmet, and you're going to write a biography about that person. I'm going to teach you how to do all the research. You're going to write a biography, and you're going to make a poster that will hang in the school, and they picked their names. Now, in high school, something changed about the 1990s. Instead of a 45-minute period, it became a block schedule, an hour and a half. I really got to be creative as a teacher. So I took my students into the library, sat them down in front of the computers, and they began to Google, and they got some basic information about their veteran. And but I told them to really learn about that person, they had to step into the community, step away from the computer, get into the community. But there was one hard and fast rule that I tried to enforce. You are forbidden, absolutely forbidden, to contact your family. And the way that I realized that is that in September, I had a study hall, and a study hall came in, and this 9th grade girl said to me, "Mr. Tatum, what's my uncle's picture doing on your bulletin board?" I said, Your uncle is Michael J. Curl?" She said, "Yeah, his picture's up on our mantle, and you know it's there. My father never talks about it." I said, "Oh." So I called the Curl family. I called the house twice. Told them what I was doing. Never got a reply. And then from Katie, I learned that from the day that the officers came to tell the dad that his brother had died, he wore black for the rest of his life. I met him 2 years ago at a dedication at Garrett Elementary. He was still wearing black. Well, that rule didn't last long, because one of the things we got was a lot of good PR from the local newspaper. A little bit of show and tell. So here's one of the articles that we were getting, people learning about what we were doing. Then all of a sudden, we started to get phone calls from families that were eager. They were really eager to come in and tell us about their loved one who died in the war. And so it was always the same. We went to I set up an appointment in the high school library. There was a table set aside next to the copy machine, and they always came with a box. They came with a box of medals and letters and remembrances and pictures, and little by little we began to accumulate the stories of these 185 amazing young men that stepped forward to serve their country. Now, every once in a while, one of my students would hit a roadblock, and they just couldn't find anything. And that happened with Marianne Fury. She picked the name of Frank Loack. And we later found out that Frank Loack only lived in Delaware County for a year before moving. And so she said, "Mr. Tatum, I can't find anything at all about Frank Loack, and the basic information on the internet says Plymouth." And I called the teacher, I called the principal of Plymouth White Marks High School, even though it's not in Delaware County. And I said, "Marianne, never call the principal, always call the librarian." And so she said, "Oh no, he was really nice. He called me back and said he had never gone to that school district." And I said, "Well, all right, let's look at what you had done. Did you go to the Historical Society and check all the old newspapers?" "Yes, I did that. We talked with Margie Johnson and Sylvia." "Did you go to Temple University and talk to the urban archivist, Brenda?" "Yeah, I did that." "How about the Free Library of Philadelphia? Did you do that? You searched all their records?" "Yes." "Nothing, Mr. Tatum." And and then she says, "But I have a clue." She took out a map, Pennsylvania, and outside of Scranton is a little community called Plymouth. And she said, "I'm going this Saturday with my parents, and we're going to go up to Plymouth and see if we can find anything about Frank Loack." Well, let me ask you, there's a lot of kids here. When you tell them not to do something, do they obey you? No. So I said, "Marianne, you're not going to go up 2 hours the turnpike for a wild goose chase." Well, they went anyway. So they went up to the local high school in Plymouth, and there was a wrestling meet, and it was open, and they went up in, and he was walking through the halls, and he found a plaque, just like we have it up the garden, and there's the name of Frank Loack. And they're taking a rubbing. And the custodian came over and said, "What are you doing?" And they explained. And the custodian said, "This is a small town. Everybody knows everybody. And can I call the Loack family and tell them what you're doing?" And she said, "Yeah." And so the Loack family invited them over, and gave them a wealth of information. So she came back on Monday on cloud nine. Here's the story of Frank Black. He lived in Delaware County for a year before the family moved up to Plymouth. And the amazing thing about these stories is that these students keep in touch with these families. Marianne Fiore, just a few days before Memorial Day, spent the afternoon with Frank's sister. It's just amazing how this continues to go. I'm just amazed by your banners out here at Brookhaven. We're just starting to do that in Upper Darby, and the power behind that are my students. They're now in their 30s, and they're doing this in Upper Darby. So I want to end with this young lady right here. The young lady on the left, her name is Jen Kozak, and you can see her holding some pictures. She got connected through some friends of Bill Chandler, one of the last to die in the Vietnam War, sad to say. And she wrote an amazing biography. Now, after we did all this, it was once again time for a field trip. So we went to the real Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. And I'm taking pictures. And Jen is up there. She's touching the name of touching the name of Bill Chandler. And I said, Jen, turn around. But I forgot to tell you that she had a little basket. And then it was a teddy bear and a birthday card and some flowers, because it was 2 days before his birthday. And I said, Jen, turn around. And she wouldn't turn around. Do you know why? Just the tears coming down her cheek. And in that moment, I knew that I had succeeded in teaching my students about the nature of war and the loss that we all feel and carry with us today. And in a couple of days, I'll be at Marcus Hook again. And last time I was there was a family up there, much like David, looking at a name. And I said, I walked over and I said, who do you know? And they pointed to the name. And then they turned around to me and said, who do you know? And without hesitation,